In a quaint little town nestled along the outskirts of Berlin, Anna's life was a blend of simplicity and unrelenting challenges. A devoted elementary school teacher in her early 30s, she had always found fulfillment in the joy of shaping young minds. Yet, beneath the surface of her composed demeanor lay the weight of a family struggling to stay afloat. Anna lived with her husband, Martin, and their 5-year-old daughter, Emma, in a modest apartment that echoed warmth despite the growing strain in their lives. Martin, a diligent civil engineer, had become the family's unyielding pillar. Long hours at the office had stretched into sleepless nights, with overtime shifts stacking one after another. His resilience was fueled by a singular purpose: to afford the mounting medical bills of his father, Friedrich. Friedrich, once a towering figure of strength and wisdom, was now confined to a hospital bed, battling the relentless grip of late-stage cancer. The vibrant man who had once told stories to Emma with a hearty laugh was now a pale shadow of his former self. The family's financial reserves had dwindled quickly under the pressure of his treatments, and the weight of responsibility bore down heavily on Martin's shoulders. Anna watched, helpless yet determined, as her husband worked tirelessly, often missing dinners and bedtime stories with Emma. The sparkle in her daughter's eyes dimmed when Martin wasn't there to kiss her goodnight. The strain was undeniable, but the love within their small family was steadfast, holding them together through the darkest hours. The clock had struck midnight by the time Martin returned home, his footsteps weary and slow. The crisp night air clung to him as he stepped inside their small apartment, the faint creak of the door a familiar sound that signaled his arrival. Anna stood in the dimly lit kitchen, her heart sinking as she took in his appearance. Martin looked thinner than the week before. His once broad shoulders now drooped, his face pale and etched with lines of fatigue. The faint stubble on his jaw seemed to accentuate the shadows under his tired eyes, a testament to weeks of sleepless nights and endless shifts. Yet, as he placed his worn leather bag by the door and met Anna's gaze, he summoned a weary smile. "I'm home," he said softly, his voice hoarse from long hours of meetings and site visits. Anna approached him, her hand gently brushing his arm. "You need to rest, Martin. This isn't sustainable," she whispered, her voice trembling with concern. But Martin shook his head, his expression firm despite his exhaustion. "We can't stop now, Anna," he replied, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We have to keep going. For Emma, for Dad. They're counting on us." His words, though steady, carried the weight of his burden. Anna saw the determination in his eyes, the same determination that had driven him to work late into the night, sacrificing his own well-being for the family he cherished. As Martin sat down to the simple meal she had left for him, Anna stood silently nearby, her heart aching. She knew he was pushing himself beyond his limits, but his resolve was unyielding. Despite his exhaustion, Martin's love for their family was a beacon of hope in their darkest moments. Once a pillar of strength and wisdom, Friedrich now lay quietly in the confines of his modest bedroom, his frail frame barely making an impression on the mattress. The sunlight that filtered through the curtains seemed hesitant, as if unwilling to disturb the heavy stillness of the room. His skin, pallid and paper-thin, stretched over the bones of his hands, which once wielded tools and guided his family with unwavering certainty. His breath came shallow, each rise and fall of his chest a laborious effort. The once vibrant man who had roared with laughter, danced at celebrations, and regaled Emma with lively tales of his youth was now but a shadow of himself. Friedrich's piercing blue eyes, now dulled by illness, gazed at the ceiling with a distant melancholy. The sound of Anna's quiet footsteps stirred him from his thoughts, and he turned his head with difficulty to see her standing in the doorway. Her presence brought a faint, fleeting smile to his lips, but it did little to lift the weight that pressed on his heart. "I've become a burden," he murmured, his voice weak and tinged with regret. Anna rushed to his side, her hand covering his trembling one. "You're our family, Friedrich," she said softly, her voice breaking. But the guilt lingered in his eyes. To him, every moment spent in that bed, every euro spent on his treatment, felt like chains around his children's lives. Friedrich's greatest sorrow was not his failing body, but the belief that his existence had become a burden on those he loved most. Dinner was a quiet affair, as it had been for many weeks. The soft clink of cutlery against plates punctuated the silence, but the usual warmth of mealtime camaraderie was absent. Anna and Emma sat at the small wooden table, the warm glow of the overhead light doing little to dispel the tension that lingered like a shadow in the room. Anna glanced at the empty chair across from her, where Martin's presence had once filled the space with lively conversation and laughter. Now it remained unoccupied most evenings, a stark reminder of the sacrifices he was making. Her eyes, heavy with worry, met Emma's curious gaze. The little girl, her cheeks rosy from the winter chill, swung her legs beneath the table as she reached for a piece of bread. "Mommy," she asked innocently, tilting her head, "why doesn't Daddy eat dinner with us anymore?" The question pierced the air, and Anna froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Across the room, Friedrich, resting on the living room couch, turned his head slightly, his eyes narrowing in shared pain. Anna swallowed hard, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Daddy's working very hard for us, Emma," she said softly. Emma blinked, her small face crinkling in thought, before shrugging and returning to her plate. But Anna couldn't look away from the empty chair. Tears welled in her eyes, and she quickly turned her head to the side, biting her lip to keep from breaking down. Behind the closed bedroom door, Martin's footsteps could be heard faintly as he prepared to leave again. For Anna, it felt as though the weight of their circumstances was growing heavier by the day, threatening to pull their family apart despite their love for one another. The house was cloaked in silence, broken only by the faint hum of the heater and the ticking of the clock on the living room wall. Anna sat on the edge of her bed, her hands resting limply on her lap. Martin's footsteps creaked softly from the kitchen, where he was reheating the meager leftovers of dinner. The air was thick with exhaustion, each of them silently shouldering their burdens. Suddenly, a soft but firm knock echoed from the hallway. Anna straightened, startled by the sound at such a late hour. Moments later, the door creaked open, revealing Friedrich leaning heavily on his cane, his face pale and drawn under the dim glow of the hallway light. "Dad, you should be resting," Anna said quickly, rising to help him. But Friedrich raised a hand, stopping her in her tracks. "I need to speak with both of you," he said, his voice frail but resolute. Martin, drawn by the sound of his father's voice, appeared in the doorway holding a plate. His brow furrowed as he set it down and guided his father to the armchair near the bed. Friedrich sank into the chair with a sigh, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the cane. He looked at his son and daughter-in-law with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "Listen to me," he began, his voice steady despite its weakness. "I've been thinking about this for a while now. The money you're spending on my treatment, it's too much. It's taking everything from you both. The work, the worry, the sacrifices. I can't allow it to continue." Anna's breath caught, and she exchanged a panicked glance with Martin, whose jaw tightened as Friedrich continued. "I want to stop the treatment," Friedrich said firmly. "There's no point in prolonging this. You have Emma to think about, your future. I won't let myself be the reason you lose everything." Anna's hand flew to her mouth as tears welled up in her eyes. Martin stiffened, his knuckles whitening as he clenched his fists. The weight of Friedrich's words hung in the room like a stone, too heavy to lift yet impossible to ignore. "Dad?" Martin said finally, his voice shaking with restrained emotion. "We're not giving up on you. Don't ask us to do this, please." Friedrich closed his eyes briefly, his face etched with pain, not from his illness, but from the anguish he knew he was causing. "I love you both," he whispered, "but I can't bear to watch you destroy yourselves for me." Friedrich's words hit like a thunderclap, leaving the room heavy with disbelief. For a moment, no one spoke, the silence broken only by Anna's sharp intake of breath. She stumbled forward, her knees giving way as she dropped to the floor beside Friedrich's chair. Her hands clutched his frail ones, trembling as tears streamed freely down her face. "Dad, please, you can't mean that," Anna choked out, her voice cracking under the weight of her emotions. "You're not a burden. You're our family. You're Emma's grandfather. We need you." Her words, raw and desperate, echoed in the small room, but Friedrich's expression didn't falter. He looked down at her, his own eyes glassy, and placed a weak hand on her shoulder. "Anna," he said softly, "I've made up my mind. It's the right thing to do." "No," she cried, shaking her head vigorously. Her grip tightened on his hands as she leaned closer, her tears soaking into the fabric of his sleeve. "Please don't do this to us. Don't leave us like this. You're the heart of this family. I can't." Her words dissolved into sobs, and Friedrich turned his gaze away, unable to bear the sight of her anguish. Martin, who had been standing frozen by the door, suddenly erupted. "Dad!" he shouted, his voice cracking with a mixture of anger and pain. He stepped forward, his fists clenched tightly at his sides. "Do you think this is what we want? Do you think we're sacrificing so much just to hear you say you're giving up?" Friedrich looked up, startled by the intensity in his son's voice. Martin's face was flushed, his eyes blazing with emotion. He took a deep breath, his voice lowering but trembling with restrained fury. "You're the reason I work those late nights. You're the reason Anna fights so hard to hold this family together. You're the reason Emma smiles every time she hears your voice." He gestured toward the door, as if Emma were just beyond it, waiting to be held by the grandfather she adored. "You're not a burden. You're the reason we keep going every single day." Friedrich's lips parted as if to respond, but no words came. The conviction in Martin's voice seemed to break through his resolve, leaving him momentarily speechless. Anna, still kneeling at his side, wiped her tears and looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. "Please, Dad," she whispered. "Please don't ask us to give up on you. We won't. We can't." Friedrich looked between them, his gaze lingering on the love and desperation in their faces. His shoulders slumped, and for the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his features. I didn't want to hurt you," he said quietly, his voice trembling. "I just wanted to protect you." "You protect us by staying," Martin replied, his tone firm but gentle. "That's all we need from you." As the night deepened and the room fell silent once more, Friedrich sat alone in the dim glow of the bedside lamp. The muffled sounds of Anna and Martin putting Emma to bed reached his ears, but his mind was elsewhere, lost in the haze of memories that filled the quiet. He thought of the days when he was a younger man, his body strong and his spirit unyielding. Back then, he was the bedrock of his family, the one who shouldered every burden without hesitation. His wife, Marlene, used to tease him about his stubborn sense of responsibility. "You act like the weight of the world is yours to carry," she'd say with a laugh, her warm smile lighting up their tiny kitchen. Those were the days when he would come home from work covered in grease and dust, only to be greeted by Marlene's embrace and the sound of Martin's boyish laughter. Friedrich had felt invincible then, like there was no storm he couldn't weather for his family. But now, the strength he had once taken for granted was gone, leaving behind a frail shadow of the man he used to be. The vibrant life he had built with Marlene had faded into quiet nights like this one, and the weight of his helplessness pressed heavily on his chest. "I was supposed to protect them," he thought bitterly, his hands trembling as he gripped the armrests of his chair. Now, he saw himself as nothing more than a burden, a drain on the resources of a family already stretched too thin. Yet, amidst the guilt and self-recrimination, there was a flicker of something else, a quiet, stubborn happiness. The love and determination he had seen in Anna and Martin's eyes that evening had reminded him of the bond that held them together. Even in his weakest moments, their unwavering care for him was proof that the values he had spent a lifetime nurturing had taken root. Tears welled in his eyes, blurring the faint glow of the lamp. "They deserve more," he whispered to the empty room, torn between his desire to protect them and his gratitude for their love. The weight of Friedrich's decision to continue treatment hung over the family like a fragile truce. Though Anna and Martin were relieved that he had relented, they couldn't ignore the shadows that lingered in his eyes. Friedrich spent long hours staring out the window of his room, his thoughts distant and heavy, as if grappling with the sense of guilt that still clung to him. Despite the heaviness, small changes began to ripple through their lives. Martin, after much urging from Anna, decided to cut back on his overtime shifts. He explained his decision to his boss, a gruff but understanding man who had noticed Martin's growing exhaustion. "Family comes first," the boss said, clapping Martin on the shoulder. With fewer late nights, Martin began to reclaim his role in the household, bringing a sense of stability that had been sorely missed. At Anna's gentle insistence, the family adopted a new routine. Every evening, no matter how chaotic the day had been, they gathered around the kitchen table to share a meal. Friedrich, though still frail, sat at the head of the table, a spot he hadn't occupied in months. Emma often climbed onto his lap, her innocent chatter filling the space with warmth and laughter. Though he tried to hide it, Friedrich's lips would curl into a small, reluctant smile as he listened to his granddaughter recount her adventures at school. The meals were simple, but filled with love. Anna made a point to cook Friedrich's favorite dishes, often enlisting Martin to help chop vegetables or stir the pot. These small acts of togetherness became a balm for the family's frayed spirits. The sight of Anna bustling around the kitchen, Martin teasing Emma over her picky eating, and Friedrich quietly observing it, all reminded them of the beauty of their shared moments. Friedrich's hardened resolve began to soften, though the cloud of guilt never entirely lifted. He started to engage more in the family's conversations, offering his dry wit and sage advice when prompted. One evening, as Emma proudly showed off a drawing she'd made of the family, Friedrich reached out to ruffle her hair, his voice tinged with emotion. "It's beautiful, just like you, little one," he murmured, his heart swelling with a gratitude he couldn't fully express. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, the warmth of these evenings began to restore something in Friedrich, a sense of belonging, of worth. Slowly but surely, he started to understand what Anna and Martin had been fighting so hard to show him, the value of being present, of simply being together. For the first time in a long while, Friedrich allowed himself to hope, even if just a little. It was a quiet afternoon when Emma toddled into Friedrich's room, clutching a sheet of paper in her small hands. Her face beamed with pride, her cheeks flushed with the excitement of sharing something special. Friedrich, who had been reclining in his chair with a book resting on his lap, looked up and smiled faintly at his granddaughter. "What have you got there, little one?" he asked, his voice tinged with curiosity and affection. Emma bounded over to him, holding up the paper with a flourish. "I made this for you, Grandpa," she declared, her eyes shining. Friedrich adjusted his glasses and took the paper from her hands, his own trembling slightly. The drawing was simple and colorful, the kind only a child could create. A happy family standing under a bright sun, with smiles stretching wide across their faces. There were 4 figures, a small girl holding hands with her parents, and next to them, an older man with a cane. Above the figures, in large clumsy letters, Emma had written, "Grandpa is my hero." Friedrich's breath caught in his throat as he read the words. His gaze lingered on the drawing, his heart swelling with an overwhelming mix of emotions. For so long, he had seen himself as a burden, someone who took more than he gave. But here, through the innocent eyes of his granddaughter, he was something entirely different. He was her hero. "Emma," he murmured, his voice breaking. Tears welled up in his eyes, and before he could stop them, they began to fall. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close as his tears dampened her golden hair. "You're the best grandpa ever," Emma said, her arms wrapped tightly around his neck. In that moment, something shifted within Friedrich. The guilt and despair that had weighed so heavily on him began to lift, replaced by a new sense of purpose. That simple drawing, with its vibrant colors and heartfelt message, became a beacon of hope. From then on, whenever his strength wavered or the pain became too much, Friedrich would look at Emma's drawing, which he had carefully pinned to the wall beside his bed. The words, "Grandpa is my hero," reminded him why he needed to keep fighting, not just for himself, but for the family who loved him so deeply. The kitchen was alive with the soft sounds of chopping and stirring, a warm glow spilling from the overhead light. Anna stood by the counter, her hands deftly peeling carrots while the pot on the stove simmered gently. Martin, with sleeves rolled up and a mischievous grin, hovered nearby, slicing onions with exaggerated precision. "You're going to cry before I do?" Anna teased, glancing at him with a raised eyebrow. Martin chuckled, pretending to wipe a non-existent tear from his cheek. "I don't know how you do this every day. These onions are ruthless." His lightheartedness brought a rare and welcome laugh from Anna, her shoulders shaking as she momentarily forgot the weight they both carried. It was a fleeting moment of joy, but one that reminded them of the partnership that had always been the foundation of their relationship. As the meal began to come together, Emma bounded into the room, her laughter echoing as she tugged at Martin's apron. "Daddy, can I help?" she asked, her wide eyes shining with excitement. "Of course, sweetheart," Martin said, lifting her onto a chair so she could mix the salad. Her tiny hands stirred with enthusiasm, sending a few leaves flying, which only made them laugh harder. When dinner was ready, Anna carried the steaming dishes to the table, where Friedrich sat waiting with a contented smile. The scene was far from perfect. The food was simple, and the challenges they faced loomed large, but the room felt lighter that evening. The sound of shared laughter and the sight of smiles, even Friedrich's subtle one, filled the space with warmth. As they sat together, Martin reached over to squeeze Anna's hand under the table, a quiet gesture of gratitude and solidarity. They didn't need words to express what they both felt. Their strength lay in each other, and as long as they stood side by side, no burden was too great to bear. The days grew shorter, and so did Friedrich's strength. The once resolute man, who had found moments of peace in the laughter of his family, now spent most of his time confined to his bed. His frail frame seemed almost swallowed by the blankets, and his breaths grew shallow, each one carrying a faint wheeze that echoed through the quiet room. Anna and Martin had rearranged the small bedroom to make it more comfortable for Friedrich. The bed was moved closer to the window so he could see the garden outside, where Emma often played, her laughter drifting in like sunlight on cloudy days. A small table beside the bed held his favorite books, a glass of water, and Emma's drawing pinned above it, a constant reminder of why he continued to fight. Despite their best efforts, Friedrich's condition continued to worsen. The pain, though managed, was ever present, etched into the lines of his face. His hands, once steady and strong, now trembled when he reached for the cup of tea Anna brought him every morning. To ensure his comfort, Anna and Martin hired a visiting nurse who came daily to monitor his condition and administer medications. The nurse, a kind woman named Greta, handled Friedrich with gentle precision, her soothing voice often drawing a faint smile from him. She taught Anna how to adjust his position in bed to ease his discomfort and showed Martin how to administer the pain relief injections. Anna became his primary caretaker during the day, staying by his side to read to him or simply sit in silence while he rested. Her quiet strength never wavered, though she often excused herself to the kitchen when her emotions threatened to overwhelm her. Martin, now home earlier than before, took over in the evenings, ensuring Friedrich felt the presence of his family even as night fell. Friedrich's appetite diminished, and with it, his energy. Meals that were once shared around the family table were now taken in small bites, coaxed by Anna or Emma, who often climbed onto the bed to sit beside him. "Just one more bite, Grandpa," she would say, her voice innocent and hopeful. He would oblige, though his smiles grew fainter each day. Even as his body failed him, Friedrich found solace in the care his family surrounded him with. The love in their small home, expressed in tender gestures and quiet reassurances, became his anchor. Though his time was running short, the moments spent in the company of those he loved most made each day a treasure. It was a cold winter morning, the kind where frost clung to the edges of the window panes and the sun hesitated to rise. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the heater. Martin stood in the kitchen, finishing his coffee before heading to work. He glanced at the clock. It was earlier than usual, but he wanted to check on Friedrich before leaving. Carrying a blanket he'd grabbed from the living room, Martin walked softly toward his father's room, careful not to disturb Anna and Emma, who were still asleep. He opened the door quietly, a small smile tugging at his lips. Friedrich always appreciated a warm blanket on mornings like this. "Morning, Dad." Martin greeted softly, stepping closer to the bed. But something was different. Friedrich lay unnaturally still, his face serene and free from the pain that had haunted him in recent months. Martin froze, his breath catching, as the realization washed over him. "Dad?" he whispered, his voice trembling. He reached out, his fingers brushing against Friedrich's cold hand. The blanket slipped from his grasp and fell to the floor. A sob rose in Martin's throat, breaking free in a raw guttural cry. "No, Dad, please no," he choked, sinking to his knees beside the bed. Tears streamed down his face as he clutched his father's lifeless hand, the weight of the loss hitting him like a wave. The sound of his anguish carried through the house, waking Anna. She rushed to the room, her heart pounding with dread. When she saw Martin kneeling by the bed, her hands flew to her mouth. "No," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Anna moved to Martin's side, wrapping her arms around him as they both wept. Her head rested on his shoulder, their shared sorrow filling the room. Emma, still in her pajamas, wandered into the doorway, clutching a small stuffed bear. Her innocent voice broke through the sobs. "Mommy? Daddy? What's wrong with Grandpa?" Anna turned to her daughter, struggling to find the words. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Grandpa, he's gone to sleep for a very long time, sweetheart." Emma frowned, stepping closer to the bed. She reached out to touch Friedrich's arm, her small hand gentle but curious. "He looks happy," she said softly, her childlike innocence shielding her from the full weight of the moment. In the quiet stillness that followed, Martin and Anna held each other tightly, their grief raw and unspoken. The man who had been their guiding light, their strength, was gone. But in his peaceful expression, they saw a final gift, an end to his suffering and the love he had carried for them until his very last breath. The day of Friedrich's funeral was cold but clear, the winter sky a pale shade of blue. A light dusting of snow covered the ground, softening the footsteps of those who gathered to bid him farewell. The service was modest, just as Friedrich would have wanted, yet the warmth of the people present filled the space with quiet comfort. Friends, neighbors, and even some of Friedrich's former colleagues came to pay their respects. Many shared stories of his kindness and strength, their voices tinged with admiration and grief. A neighbor recounted how Friedrich had once helped rebuild her garden fence after a storm, refusing payment. Another spoke of his laughter, a booming sound that had once filled every room he entered. Each memory painted a picture of a man who had lived fully and given freely. Martin stood beside the casket, his hand resting on its smooth wood, his heart heavy yet steady. Anna held Emma close, her fingers brushing through the child's soft hair as they listened to the pastor's words. Friedrich's life, though marked by hardship, had been rich in love and meaning, a legacy that lived on in those he left behind. As the service concluded, the family lingered at the graveside, the air filled with the faint sound of wind rustling through the nearby trees. Martin stepped forward, his voice steady but low. "Dad," he began, his words carried on the crisp air, "you gave us everything. You taught me how to be strong, how to love, and how to never give up on family. We'll keep those lessons alive." Anna joined him, her voice trembling but resolute. "We promise to honor you by living the way you wanted us to, together, with love and happiness. We'll make sure Emma remembers you as the hero she always believed you were." Emma, too young to fully grasp the moment, looked up at the sky. "Goodbye, Grandpa," she said softly, her small voice carrying a sweetness that brought tears to Anna's eyes. As they walked away, leaving behind the man who had been their rock, Martin and Anna felt a sense of peace amid their sorrow. Friedrich's passing was a profound loss, but his love and the lessons he imparted were enduring gifts. Together, they resolved to carry forward his spirit, holding on to the happiness he had always wanted for them. The house was smaller, nestled on a quiet street at the edge of town, but it felt more like home than the larger one they'd left behind. The air inside was light, free from the lingering weight of debt and uncertainty. The furniture was sparse but practical, with bright curtains that Anna had sewn herself and Emma's colorful drawings adorning the walls. Selling their previous home had been a difficult decision, but Martin and Anna knew it was the right one. With the proceeds, they had paid off their debts, including the mounting medical expenses from Friedrich's treatment. For the first time in years, they no longer lived under the shadow of overdue bills and financial strain. Martin had also made another significant change. He no longer worked late into the night. After Friedrich's passing, he realized the toll his long hours had taken on his health and his family. Now, he kept to a reasonable schedule, returning home in time for dinner, where he could sit at the table with Anna and Emma, share stories, and laugh together. The extra time allowed him to help Anna around the house and take Emma to the park, moments he had once missed. Anna, too, had found a new rhythm. She reopened her small tutoring classes, teaching neighborhood children in the afternoons. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to contribute to the household and give her a sense of purpose. Her days were fuller, but they were filled with things she loved: teaching, baking with Emma, and creating a warm home where love could flourish. The family no longer had the luxury of excess, but they had what mattered most: each other. In their simpler life, they found the kind of happiness that no money could buy. It was a life Friedrich would have been proud of. And his memory lived on in their daily moments of quiet joy. Emma, now a little older and wiser in her own way, often spoke of her grandfather with a sparkle in her eyes. To her friends at school, Friedrich wasn't just an ordinary grandpa. He was her superhero. "My grandpa was the strongest man ever," she would proudly tell her classmates during recess. "He used to tell me stories, and he even helped Daddy fix things around the house when he wasn't feeling well." Her small friends would listen in awe as she recounted tales of Friedrich's kindness and courage, even if her childlike perspective painted him as a figure from a fairy tale. At home, Emma's stories about her grandfather became a cherished part of their routine. During dinner or before bed, she would reminisce, her voice animated and her expressions vivid. "Remember when Grandpa told me that funny story about the squirrel stealing his sandwich?" she'd ask, giggling at the memory. Martin and Anna would smile, joining in with their own anecdotes, keeping Friedrich's memory alive as a shared treasure. In their new home, Anna had created a small corner in the living room dedicated to Friedrich. Among the framed photographs and mementos was Emma's drawing, the one she had made during Friedrich's final days. The words, "Grandpa is my hero," stood out in bold, colorful letters, and it hung proudly on the wall. Anna often paused to look at it, her heart swelling with both sorrow and gratitude. That drawing wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a testament to the love that bound their family together, even in the face of loss. For Emma, it was a reminder of her superhero grandpa. For Anna and Martin, it symbolized the strength they had found in each other and the enduring legacy Friedrich had left behind. On quiet evenings, as the soft glow of the fireplace illuminated their modest living room, Anna often found her thoughts drifting back to Friedrich's final words. His voice, frail yet resolute, echoed in her memory. "Happiness isn't found in money, but in togetherness and love." Those words had become a guiding light for their family, a reminder of what truly mattered. Life in the smaller home was far from perfect. There were still challenges to face, bills to pay, and moments of exhaustion, but there was also an undeniable sense of peace. Anna, Martin, and Emma had learned to cherish the simple, fleeting joys of their everyday lives. Dinner time was no longer rushed or solitary. The three of them sat together around the table, sharing laughter, stories, and occasionally Emma's dramatic recounting of her school day. Even on days when the food was plain, the atmosphere was rich with warmth and connection. Martin, now home more often, took pride in the little things, helping Emma with her homework, fixing a squeaky door, or surprising Anna with freshly brewed tea. His once overwhelming workload had been replaced by a balanced routine, giving him the chance to be fully present for his family. He often thought of his father during these quiet moments, silently thanking him for teaching him the value of time spent with loved ones. Anna, too, found herself savoring moments that might have once gone unnoticed. The sound of Emma's giggles, the feel of Martin's hand resting on hers, the golden light streaming through the kitchen window in the early evening, all these things reminded her of Friedrich's wisdom. Their lives were simpler now, but they were filled with a profound sense of gratitude. In the living room, Friedrich's corner remained a sacred space. Anna would often glance at Emma's drawing of Grandpa the Hero, her heart swelling with a bittersweet mixture of loss and love. "You were right, Dad," she would think. "Happiness really is in the little things." Even on hard days when fatigue set in or unexpected expenses arose, Anna and Martin leaned on each other, drawing strength from the lessons Friedrich had left them. Together, they had built a life that wasn't just about surviving. It was about treasuring every precious moment they had with one another. And in doing so, they honored Friedrich's legacy in the most meaningful way possible, by living a life full of love. It started with a single post. Anna, wanting to honor Friedrich's memory, shared a heartfelt story about their family's journey, how they had struggled, found strength in one another, and ultimately learned to cherish the simple joys of life. She spoke of Friedrich's resilience, his final message about happiness, and how his love had shaped their lives even after he was gone. Her words resonated deeply with those who read them. The post, accompanied by a photo of Emma's colorful drawing with the words, "Grandpa is my hero," quickly spread across social media. People from all walks of life began to comment, sharing their own experiences of loss, love, and finding meaning in the small moments. Messages of support and admiration poured in. Strangers expressed how deeply moved they were by Anna's story, praising her family's strength and their unwavering devotion to one another. "Your father-in-law was a remarkable man," one comment read. "His wisdom and love continue to inspire, even to those of us who never met him." Others found solace in Anna's words, feeling seen and understood in their own struggles. "Reading this reminds me of my own father," one person shared. "I've been so caught up in work that I've forgotten what truly matters. Thank you for the reminder." Local friends and neighbors, too, reached out to the family, some bringing meals or offering help in small but meaningful ways. Emma's teacher even printed the story to share with her class, encouraging the children to talk about their own families and what made them feel loved. Anna and Martin were overwhelmed by the outpouring of kindness. It wasn't just the words of encouragement that touched them. It was the realization that their story had reminded so many people of the importance of family, love, and togetherness. Through their pain, they had inspired others to look closer at their own lives, finding gratitude in the bonds they often took for granted. Friedrich's legacy, Anna realized, wasn't just alive in their home. It had reached far beyond, touching the hearts of people they would never meet. It was a testament to the power of love and the simple, enduring truths he had lived by. The story of Anna's family serves as a poignant reminder of one universal truth. Love within a family is the strongest force, capable of carrying us through life's darkest moments. It is a quiet, unwavering strength that doesn't demand recognition, but makes itself known in the smallest, most profound ways. In a comforting touch, a shared laugh, or a sacrifice made without hesitation. Throughout their journey, it was love that gave Anna and Martin the courage to face insurmountable challenges. It was love that guided Friedrich to fight for his family, even in his weakest moments. And it was love, pure and unconditional, that inspired little Emma to remind her grandfather he was her hero when he needed it most. This love wove itself into their lives, transforming pain into resilience and loss into gratitude. The lesson is clear. Happiness and strength are not found in material wealth or outward success, but in the bonds we share with those closest to us. Time spent with family, even in difficult circumstances, is the foundation upon which lasting memories and profound joy are built. Anna's family learned to cherish every fleeting moment, sharing simple meals, laughing over Emma's stories, or sitting together in quiet companionship. These moments, though seemingly small, became the glue that held them together through adversity. For those reading their story, the message is simple, yet profound. Do not wait for hardship or loss to remind you of what truly matters. In a world that often prioritizes productivity and possessions, take the time to nurture your relationships with loved ones. Hug your parents, call your siblings, laugh with your children. These acts, though small, create a tapestry of love and connection that will outlast any hardship. Above all, be present. Life's uncertainties make every shared moment precious. Let Friedrich's words echo in your heart. Happiness isn't found in money, but in togetherness and love. Carry that wisdom forward, and let it guide you to live fully in the embrace of those who matter most. In the end, love is what remains, a light that endures through every storm, illuminating the path forward with hope, gratitude, and the unshakable bond of family. It was a warm spring afternoon, the kind that carried the soft scent of blooming flowers and the hum of bees flitting from petal to petal. Anna, Martin, and Emma walked hand in hand through a field of wildflowers near their home. The sun cast a golden glow over the meadow, painting the scene with quiet beauty. Emma skipped ahead, her laughter ringing out as she plucked daisies and carefully added them to the bouquet she held tightly in her small hands. Anna and Martin strolled behind her, their pace unhurried, their hearts light despite the loss they still carried. The meadow was one of Friedrich's favorite places, a spot where he had often taken Emma to play. Being here now felt like a way of honoring his memory, a way to keep him close even in his absence. He would have loved this, Anna said softly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears as she watched Emma's joy. Martin nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. He's probably watching us now, laughing at how many flowers Emma is picking. They both chuckled, the sound mingling with Emma's delighted giggles. It was moments like this, simple, unassuming, that reminded them of Friedrich's words. Happiness is in togetherness and love. Back at home, the family gathered in the living room, where a special corner paid tribute to Friedrich. At its heart was Emma's cherished drawing, framed and proudly displayed on the wall. The words, "Grandpa is my hero," stood out in bold, colorful letters, a lasting symbol of the love and bond that had shaped their family. As Anna and Martin sat on the couch, with Emma nestled between them, they looked at the drawing and smiled. Though Friedrich was gone, his spirit lived on in their hearts, in their shared laughter, and in the simple, beautiful life they continued to build together. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of loyalty, love, and the incredible bonds between humans and animals. Join us as we share stories that remind us of what truly matters in life. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment.